In the early 1970s, the synthesizer market was dominated by two industry giants, Moog and ARP. Bob Moog had created massive modular systems that were on stage with players like Rick Wakeman and Keith Emerson, and the popular Mini Moog was in the hands of huge numbers of keyboard players. ARP Instruments had challenged Moog with the ARP 2600, a large, extremely versatile system, and then answered the Mini Moog with the ARP Odyssey, a scaled-down version of the 2600 that still had an amazing degree of flexibility. These synthesizers were battling it out in the marketplace with fat-sounding, self-oscillating filters, inventive ways to modulate the sound, and above all, oscillators. By stacking oscillators on top of each other, the sound got bigger and fatter and huger. The Odyssey had 2 oscillators, the Mini Moog and the ARP 2600 had 3, and those huge modular systems had as many oscillators as you could afford. The sounds from these synthesizers were huge. And in the midst of these Goliaths battling it out for the hugest sound, a Japanese organ manufacturer decided to try their hand at building synthesizers, and released a quirky little synth that had only a single oscillator, an odd filter that didn't even self-oscillate. In fact, it was called a traveler instead of a filter, and it hardly had any modulation capabilities. It was 1973. The company was called KO Electronic Laboratories, and the synth was the MiniKorg 700. What the MiniKorg did have, however, was a simplicity that its competitors were lacking. Instead of getting the desired sound by setting a multitude of knobs all to the correct positions, or even more cumbersome, by plugging handfuls of patch cables all into the right places and then setting lots of knobs, the MiniKorg had an immediacy that other synths were lacking. And while it didn't have the huge fatness of the Mini Moog or other multiple oscillator synths, it did have a unique sound that worked nicely for leads, and it quickly became popular. A year later, a second oscillator and a ring modulator were added to the MiniKorg, giving it a much larger and more versatile sound. This model was called the 700S, and such notable players as Vangelis, Kitaro, The Cure, Human League, and Stevie Wonder were using them to make hit records. But perhaps the one person that used the MiniKorg to create a truly signature sound was Greg Hawkes, when the new wave band The Cars crashed onto the music scene in 1978. Their debut album sold 6 million copies, and the MiniKorg was all over it. In fact, to this day, Greg Hawkes still has and still plays his MiniKorg. The success of the MiniKorg established KO, later renamed simply as Korg, as a major player in the synthesizer business. And over the last half-century, Korg has unleashed such classics as the MS-10 and the MS-20, the Delta and the Lambda, the Polysix, the monstrous Trident, the iconic M1, and modern workstation classics like the Triton and the Kronos. And now, they've gone full circle. The very latest synth from Korg is a reissue of the very first synth from Korg. To make a faithful recreation of the MiniKorg synthesizer, Korg called on Fumio Maeda, who designed it way back in the early 1970s. It wasn't difficult to find Maeda-san. He still works for Korg to this day. Korg chose to recreate the MiniKorg 700S model with its second oscillator and ring modulator. And the new 700FS was recreated with such thoughtfulness. It uses identical analog circuitry and looks almost exactly the same, just like when Korg reproduced the iconic ARP 2600. And just like with the 2600, the reissue MiniKorg adds a few really nice features, all without losing the character of the original. The modern keybed is a nice improvement and offers aftertouch. And a joystick adds another level of real-time modulation and pitch bending. An onboard spring reverb adds dimension to the sound in a way that's consistent with the era of the original. The back panel offers modern connectivity with USB, MIDI, CV, and audio sync. Even though the original MiniKorg was fairly quick to dial in a sound, the reissue makes it instantaneous, with 14 presets available at the touch of a button. And the arpeggiator makes the MiniKorg an even more useful tool. Just switch on repeat. You can switch on hold if you don't want to hold the keys down. And then use the slider labeled repeat to control the speed. Let's take a look at the filter section now, which Korg called the Traveler. And what this is two separate sliders. The top slider is a low-pass filter. The bottom slider is a high-pass filter. And the really cool thing about the MiniKorg is Korg made these two knobs that engage each other. So with one finger, you can move both filters together and sweep through the sound. You're basically doing a bandpass filter sweep there. And other synthesizers of the day didn't have this. Now you can certainly work them independently as well. But when you're going in a certain direction, those filter knobs lock together, which was a limitation that some players back in the day didn't like, so they would cut off those little nubs that engaged each other. Korg very kindly sends a replacement set with the new MiniKorg FS that does not have those nubs, so you can use whichever you like. And it all comes with a really nice carrying case.